today I'm taking a look at another audiobook technology. Now, the oldest one of these that I've featured goes back 60 or so years. This one's quite a bit more recent than that. In fact, this dates from 2006. That's when it was launched. This is the Playaway. And in here, we've got a preloaded digital audio book on this little device. Now, I remember seeing these on sale in an airport terminal, and of course the idea being that your long-haul traveller wanting to pass some time on the flight would pick one of these up on the way to the departure gate. Now, when I set out making this video, I really thought I was just featuring a piece of retro tech, a device from the past, a little bit of a curiosity. After all, I only remember seeing these for sale 10 plus years ago for a brief period of time. It seems like the kind of thing that came and went quite quickly. You'd imagine nowadays, of course, if you were listening to an audio book on the go, well, you'd be listening to it via a smartphone, via an app on your phone. Prior to the smartphone taking that role, the most common way that you would have listened to an audiobook on the go would have been via a series of cassettes played on your personal stereo. This thing seems to fit neatly in the gap in between. It came out in 2006, so it's when smartphones are in their infancy, but it's when cassette tape usage is dying off. And there's so many things where the smartphone took over the role of the device, and this just seemed like another one of those, along with the personal stereo, the point-and-shoot digital camera, voice memo-taking devices. There's so many others. But yeah, you can't really imagine this thing surviving in any way to this day, and yet it is doing. It's still on the market. You can go on the Playaway website. You can get the latest titles on Playaway. A product that I haven't seen being sold for well over a decade is still around and still seems to be doing quite well, and I'll explain why that's the case later on in the video. But first, let's take a look at this one from 2008. Okay, now before we look at the player, there are a couple of bits of information that we can take from the box here. First off, we can see that it's the Pelican Brief, the novel by John Grisham, and it's complete and unabridged. So it's this whole thing here in audio form. And how long is that? Well, it's 11 hours and 37 minutes. And notice it's read by a real person, not some kind of computer text-to-speech voice. And the format that it's in, well, if this is to be believed, it's just an MP3 player. Now, looking at the back here, we've got a quick get start guide. Very easy. Plug your headphones in, turn it on and press play. This lists what the individual buttons on the player do, so let's just have a look at those buttons here. So, EQ, well, that's an equalizer, but according to the back here, it switches between 6 different EQ modes, graphic equalizer presets. The SP button on the right, that apparently has 3 different speeds for the narrator for books, or it's the shuffle play button if it was a music device. I didn't know they did these as music devices, and the volume up and down either side of the liquid crystal display there in the middle, and that shows the time that's remaining in the chapter that you're listening to, as well as the battery indicator. And then at the bottom we've got track forward and back, or chapter back and forward, I suppose, but also it's rewind and fast forward if you were to hold those buttons down, and then we've just got the play and pause button at the bottom there. So let's take a closer look at the player itself. Well, as well as the buttons that surround that screen there, the only other thing that we've got on here really is the headphone output. And if we look inside the box, it does come with some cheap looking in-ear earbud headphone thingamajigs, but we've also got this. That is a neck lanyard, and in the top of the device there's a little bit that you can hook that through, so you can hang this around your neck while you're listening to your book. Just imagine somebody with this hanging down in front of them. There's no need to ask them what it is they're listening to. Now, the battery in this, well, it fits in this end section here where it's got the name of the author, and if we just open this up, I just need to unclip it here. It just takes 1 AAA. Now, you'll have noticed that too was also in the box. It's got a Kodak battery in there. I don't know if that's the original one. I'm going to stick a new AAA Duracell in here, and hopefully this thing works. I've never listened to it yet. I've had it stored for a while, and I'll be interested to hear how good the audio quality is on this. Okay, now rather than plug this into those earbuds, I'll plug it into my speakers I've got here, and we'll switch it on, holding down the power button for a few seconds. Keep your eye on the screen there, see what's displayed. Pause, and 25, 35. it seems to already be in a chapter. It looks like whoever had this previously got up to chapter 3 and then gave up on it. But let's just have a listen. It starts off quiet. Let's just turn it up.
Resting on the railing while staring intently at this.
Maximum volume 25, then it loops back round again.
Plan that way. The pier at this hour was always deserted. The headlights of an occasional car flickered along the shoreline, but the headlights never stopped at this hour. He watched the red and blue channel lights far from shore. He checked his watch without moving his head. The clouds.
Not a bad little interface, really. You know, with the time that's counting down, the buttons we've got here.
Were low and thick, and it would be difficult to see it until it was almost to the pier.
Very easy to use, and I like the way it kind of fades out when you press pause rather than stopping straight away and then fades back in again. Let's just turn it off, see what happens with that. So I'm going to hold it down. It's counted down, 3, 2, 1, and then it goes off. That's quite a nice little thing as well, so you don't accidentally just press that button and turn it off. So it seems pretty well thought out. Now the audio there, let's just have another listen to that. I mean, it clearly sounded a little bit compressed, but perfectly understandable, but just perhaps a little bit of a low bit rate, but doesn't really need to be all that much for audio. Perhaps it's down to 32 kilobits a second. Bit annoying that it comes back on at a low volume again, but I suppose you just adjust it every time you turn it on.
Stolen from a wrecked truck at a scrapyard near Durham. The pickup had been stolen in Baton Rouge. The farmer was not from anywhere and performed none of the thievery. He was a pro, and so someone else did the dirty little deeds.
Yeah, perfectly listenable, that. Not annoying, not that kind of twangy, metallic, ultra-low bitrate. I don't know what it is. It might be 64 kilobits a second or something, but it certainly sounds fine. I wonder how much storage there is in this to hold 11 and a half hours worth of audio. I mean, that must be one of the biggest costs in here. Back in 2006, when they were putting these together, or perhaps 2008, when they made this one, the cost of memory to hold that much audio in an MP3 format would have been, well, it would have taken up quite a large percentage of the overall cost. But we do have this LCD screen here and all these buttons and things. Not a particularly cheap thing to make by the look of it, and just plays the one book as well. Yeah, let me have another listen to this through some headphones, see if I can notice any kind of artifacts on the compression. Yeah, I've got to say, it sounds really pretty good through these headphones. A lot better than it did through the speakers. In fact, let me pipe it directly into the camera and we'll work our way through the EQs and the different speed settings.
The First Lady was on the West Coast, attending a series of $5,000 a plate breakfasts, where the rich and pretentious gladly shucked out the money for cold eggs and cheap champagne, and the chance to be seen and maybe photographed with the Queen, as she was known. So the president was sleeping alone when the phone rang. In the great tradition of American presidents, he had in years past thought of keeping a mistress. But now it seemed so non-Republican. Besides, he was old and tired. He often slept alone when the Queen was at the White House. He was a heavy sleeper. It rang 12 times before he heard it. He grabbed it and stared at the clock. 4:30 a.m. He listened to the voice, jumped to his feet, and 8 minutes later was in the Oval Office. No shower, no tie.
I've got to say, it sounded perfectly fine to me. I preferred some of the EQ settings to the others, but I would have been quite happy listening to this at its maximum speed, and I could listen to a whole book on this device without finding it at all grating. It's easy to operate, absolutely no issues at all with the device itself as far as its function goes, although there are some other concerns. Now, one thing I will say about this is that it's quite a neat little thing. Say you were travelling on an international flight, this is the kind of thing you could quite easily pop into your pocket. A lot easier than even the paperback version. So yeah, convenient little format. Kind of. But the problem is that, well, hold on, let me just put that down, because when you bought it in the airport terminal, it came in a box this size. So yeah, this is a nice little thing. Well, you got this though as well. And now our size advantage has been lost in a way. Of course, you think, well, you don't have to take that with you. So what do? You got this big plastic box and you just bin it in the airport so you can take that with you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the idea was there. Now, of course, they must have thought about this because later on it came in a smaller size of case, but still. Okay, this smaller packaging design, this comes with a book that is copyright 2011. This one is still sealed as well, so slightly later on than the other. This has got 14 hours of audio on it, and I notice on the front here it says HD audio. I don't know if that is a change to the spec, if the device is any different. Let's open it up and have a look. Okay, well, first off, we've got a leaky battery in here. It's a good job they didn't put it inside the device itself. Got some more cheap earbuds. Let's just take it out of there. If we pop them side by side, we can see that the device itself doesn't appear to have changed in any way as far as its external features and functions and the interface on there. So I'll just pop a battery in this one after I've dusted it off, and we'll see if we can get this one to play as well, and if it sounds any better than the other one. I should imagine it's pretty much the same. I notice on this one it doesn't have the author's name on there, so they can use the same battery cover on all of them. It's not as difficult for them to print as it would be for that one, so they've simplified it down a little bit for themselves. And at the bottom here we've got the instructions for the player on this one, whereas this has a bit of information about the book. So again, you can reuse the same bottom piece on all of these. It's just this side now that you have to stick a label on, just to make it a little bit simpler.
For openers, I simply called a DMV office from the payphone in a restaurant.
Yeah, the operation of this seems exactly the same as the other one, which makes me think that this information that's on the instructions that's in this one will probably work on the other as well. It mentions if you want to go right back to the beginning to reset, whilst it's pause, press SP and track back, then press play. So let's just try that on the other one as well. Okay, so it's on chapter 8 at the moment and it's in the pause mode. So let's just press both of these buttons together. And not a lot is happening there, is it? Still exactly the same position as it was. Okay, now with the newer one, let's try that. So I've moved it on a couple of chapters here. We go to chapter 8 in this one. SP and back, and notice it's now showing reset on the screen there. So if we were to hold that down long enough, it would reset it, and then we press play and we'd be back at the beginning again. Yep, it's turning itself off, and then it'll no doubt have to be powered back on. So yeah, they've changed the software a little bit in this, so it makes me wonder if this HD audio thing has any truth to it. Let me have a listen through some headphones, see if I notice any great improvement in the audio quality. I might be imagining it, but it does sound better. I think what's probably happened here is the original one was using a pretty low bit rate, and then with this one they've increased the bit rate because the price of memory has come down. But just have a listen yourself, see if you notice the quality being any better in this one.
Ability on the phone call I was about to place. This was the challenge. I had a Novatel PTR 825 cell phone, which back then was one of the hottest phones on the market. I wanted to feel safe talking to my friends on it and not have to wonder if somebody from the FBI or local law enforcement was listening in. I knew a way that might be possible. Now I was trying to find out if what I had in mind could really work. My plan was based on a trick involving the phone's electronic serial number, or ESN.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit more sophisticated because it's got additional speed options as well. The other one just went normal, fast or faster, whereas this has two different slow speeds as well. Just have a listen.
I was pretty sure those chips would make me the only person outside Novatel who could change the number of his Novatel cell phone just by pressing the buttons on his keypad. Not only would it let me talk for free, but it would give me a cloak of invisibility, guaranteeing my conversations would be private. And it would also give me a safe callback number anytime I wanted to social engineer a target company. But how was I going to get that package sent to me without being caught?
So whilst at first glance these look like the same device, it turns out that the newer version, the one labelled HD Audio, does have a couple of noticeable and worthwhile improvements. I've just spotted one other revision that came with this 2011 version over this original one from 2008, and that is the absence of the lanyard that was included in the case with the original. Remember, this was sealed when I opened it up, and it's definitely not inside here, although if you look at the top of the device, the appropriate hole to thread a lanyard through is still there. So if you really wished, you could hang this around your neck like a medallion, but you'd have to provide your own lanyard if you wanted to do that. But there you go, we've now had a look at a couple of different versions of the Playaway, the all-in-one audiobook that's preloaded and portable. However, the most recent one I've got here is from 2011. So let's bring things up to date. Now, ironically, for something that was once sold at an airport, this just would not fly nowadays. By that I mean the idea wouldn't be accepted. After all, it's pretty much a disposable, single-use audiobook. I say single-use, I mean you could listen to it multiple times, but are you really going to do that with a book like this? You might perhaps pass it on to a friend after you've listened to it, but that might just be to one or two people at most. More than likely, you won't find anyone that has the same taste in books as you do, doesn't want to listen to your audiobooks. So after you've listened to it, you stick it in a drawer, and then at some point in the future, it just gets binned and creates more e-waste. And that's what I mean. It doesn't really seem to fit in with the way we think about things nowadays. I don't think a product like this would be acceptable nowadays. When it comes to recycling and reuse of materials and Earth's resources, all that kind of stuff. Also, though, on the other hand, you got the smartphone, which ate its lunch. So it just doesn't seem like this should still be on the market, and yet it is. And you can get the latest releases on it. Why is that the case? Well, it's because the Playaway company pivoted. They stopped trying to sell these to individuals just about to board a plane. Instead, they sold them to institutions and libraries, places that could stock these and loan them out multiple times. And of course the prices reflect that. These are no longer for individuals like you or I to buy. No, these are for institutions, for libraries, and they're going to rent them out multiple times. And the prices reflect that, just like back in the day, if you'd have bought a pre-recorded movie on a videotape, you might have paid £15 in the UK, whereas your video rental store would have paid perhaps £80 to £90 for that same title. It's the same thing going on here, so don't be shocked at these prices. You're not supposed to be buying these things. It's other people who buy them and then loan them out to you. Back in the day when individuals bought these things, well, they cost around about $35, and that was all the way back in 2006. And I think this now makes perfect sense as a device to loan out. After all, you don't have to have a smartphone and a data plan and a subscription to an audiobook service. It's all just here. Just loan that out. When you're finished, pass it back. I'll pass it on to somebody else that wants to listen to it. The ideal thing for children. If they were to break or lose this, it really wouldn't be the end of the world, whereas with a smartphone it might be a little bit more serious. Another thing to mention with this, of course, it's just running off a single normal off-the-shelf battery. We're not dealing with an internal battery that's not replaceable here that has to be charged up via a lead and a charger. It's just such a simple system, the ideal thing for passing it around to people. And really the smartphone gave this thing a reason to exist. Rather than killing it off, the market that the smartphone took away, the audiobook market, well, it created a lot more interest in audiobooks. There's a lot more audiobooks being recorded now than there ever were. But also it left a bit of a gap, because the people who just wanted to borrow an audiobook from a library, well, you can't do that now. It's all up in the cloud and it's data and whatever have you. I mean, people in the past would have borrowed audiobooks on a cassette. It would have been a physical audiobook that they could take home, listen on their device, and then pass it back to the library. Of course, nowadays you can't expect people to have a player at home. So it left this gap for a physical audiobook system, and that's the gap that they've filled up with this. So yeah, rather than the smartphone killing it, it gave it a reason to exist. But anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.